I started it again. I was thinking about you put me in mind of this. My friend and I going into a train station restroom in Germany. And there was a door for Damen and a door for Herren. And he went on into the bathroom, and I came in a little bit later. And here he's sitting on a commode, and there's a big old woman sitting right beside him. Both the doors emptied into the same room. My brother, who lives in China, the public toilets there are, well, a little less modern than ours. They are fellowship toilets, and you could have an Essene meeting in there. But I imagine in most fellowship toilets, if you bring your group in, you probably have more of a Quaker meeting. Mm-hmm. Lee, would you care to tell us about the toilets in Haiti? I guess he's not speaking. He went and stayed in Haiti for the Ahad. I guess it was in 2016, maybe. And he was staying in a regular person's house that lives there, and their toilet was completely open. It was in its separate room, but it had no roof on it. And it was basically, just a hole in the ground. My wife and I went to Israel one time, and she was very sick. And we were going down the Via Dolorosa, and she had to go, so she pounded on somebody's door, and they let him in. And it was just a hole in the concrete there, but she deposited something other than what was expected. Her sunglasses, quite expensive ones, fell down in there. She said, "Can you go get those out?" I said, No. I have a recording of an essay about Qumran toilet. If you haven't heard that, it's well worth what they found when they dug up the Qumran toilet. Oh, seriously. Seriously, we think of the Essenes having no disease, living a long, long time. But what James Tabor found when he excavated the Qumran latrine was an unbelievable amount of parasites. We don't like this topic. Everybody's looking really strange here. No toilet. All right. I'll get off that. I'm going to talk about the genealogy of Paul and Herod. We have been kind of moving around the subject, the possibility of Paul being a Herodian. And of course, one of our group, Robert Eisenman, worked really hard on trying to find Paul's genealogy, see where he came from, because he found in the New Testament letter that Paul had greeted his kinsman Herodian. Nobody else would have that name but Herod. Herodian obviously was a child in that notice, but it mentioned also his father, Aristobulus. And when we look, we find those two people in there, the Herod, little Herod, Herodian means little Herod, and we find his Herod with a father named Aristobulus in the genealogy tree. We see that Aristobulus indeed was married to a woman named Salome, who just happened to be the daughter of Herodias, who had been the wife of Herod Philip, and taken wife by Herod Antipas. And so we find that Paul doesn't mention her name, but mentions the household. That's the Salome that supposedly danced for the head of John the Baptist. That was really a shocker when I came to that realization. But what I'm going to do is I'll put up a genealogy of the Herods, and we'll try to find Paul in there. So I'm going to go to a website, and I'll put the website address up there for you as well in case you want to get this particular copy of the genealogy. And you might see, oh, it came right up. I'm using Bing these days. You know why? Bing pays you to use that search engine. They pay you. And so I like the idea of getting paid for doing something I'm already doing all the time. Does anybody hear me talking?
Yes, we can hear you good.
Okay.
We all hear you.
How much?
Do you screen share that genealogy? Because we can't see it.
Yeah,
I can't.
I'm getting it for you.
Okay.
I'm going to put it on the screen share for later, and I'll put it on chat as well. All right, do you see it now? Can you see it now? You're not seeing my screen share? What are you seeing?
Yes, I can see it. It's PDF element.
Yeah, it's got a watermark on it. Because I used a piece of software to put this together that I hadn't paid for. It's just a trial version. But you can see that. Well, thanks for all the answers. Let me go through it a little bit. We start up here. This is a Herodian line, and it's very hard to find one as complete as this. This is the chart that comes out of the New Testament code, out of one of the appendices. So if
This is from Iceman. This is his.
yes,
Okay.
I don't know that it's his. Maybe there's he gives some reference to it, but it is in his book, and it's much more thorough than any I've seen. And I've looked and looked and looked at them, and I've gotten some other ones from other sources that don't have near the people on here that this one does. And it goes farther than the one that we were looking at, Liz. It starts back here at Antipas, the Idumean, who got in with, he was a peasant, got in with the Romans somehow, and Idumea was part of the people that helped Rome get into that area way back in early 1st century BC. Antipater is also known as the Idumean, and he is married to Cypros. Cypros the First. I looked that name up several years ago, and it was a name used by priestesses, but the name Cypros obviously refers to Cyprus. You find this name throughout this genealogy. As for these names like Antipater and Antipas, those can be translated out of Greek. You know, pas means everything. Anti means against. So Antipas would kind of mean against everything. Antipater, pater is father or fatherland, and again, anti is against. And so we have Antipater and Cypros, and the second generation here, we've got Herod the Great, we've got Faisal, Pheroras, and Salome. Salome is the one we want to look at. I've got asterisks here. red asterisk where we need to look at the people there. I read novels and historical works, especially Josephus, on Herod the Great and his relationship with his sister Salome. She had a lot to do with the decisions he made, and she always backed him up. So that's probably one of the reasons that she survived him. Herod the Great and his wives really are not involved in the male side of Paul. And I think that Liz will probably talk about the female side because I haven't got that far yet. But you can see the types of people he marries. Cleopatra, not the one that killed herself with Anthony. I think that's Cleopatra the seventh, but Liz will probably know that better than I. Malthus, the Samaritan, of Samaritan royalty. Two Mariamenes. This one was a daughter of the high priest.
From Egypt.
Yeah, and the name Boethus is very famous because the high priests at the time of Joshua and on were trading off terms with the sons of Annas. Annas, had 5 sons that were in the high priesthood. When they would fall out of favor with the Herodians, then the sons of Boethus would normally get in there. There's a lot in the Mishnahs and Targum about this Boethus.
Can I interrupt you once? Can I just ask a question?
No, you interrupt is fine.
I don't mean to, but okay, so is this Boethus is from Egypt? Would you say this is like going back to the temple? This is definitely a Hebraic line of priests?
Yes, definitely.
So establishing that.
He goes back to the 1st century BC, and some even think that he's one of the characters in the Dead Sea Scrolls as well. And his line just went on and on and on. Very famous. We had a second Mariamene. Now we have Salome, we'll go to her. Salome, Bologna. That's how you open doors. That's the secret word, like abracadabra. See that Salome married an Idumean named Costobarus. There's also a relationship with this Costobarus, especially the name and the Greek names.
So who's Salome, though? Who do you think that is?
Oh, this is Herod's sister. Herod the Great.
So she's an Idumean. So she would be an Idumean.
She's an Idumean, yeah. But remember, they were living in Rome, and then Herod was living in the palaces, various palaces, and especially in the Herodium. He had the Herodium.
But there doesn't seem to be any genealogy from her, per se, in this, right?
Oh.
It's hard.
Yeah, there is. That's where we're going. We're going down her line. We're going to leave Herod the Great. We know a lot about Antipas and Archelaus and Philip and those guys. They're all in the New Testament. But going on Salome, another reason that she gained favor is, for some reason, she encouraged Herod to murder Mariamene, who was the last princess of the Maccabees. It's almost as though there was a conspiracy to get rid of whoever was left of the Maccabees, and one way to do that is to marry the Maccabees. And indeed, Herod the Great married Mariamene, Maccabean princess, executed by Herod, it looks like in the 29, but also Herod murdered her 2 sons, Archelaus and Antipas. Both of them were, no, not those guys. I'm sorry, I got Malthus's children. Alexander and Aristobulus, I think. Let me see if I can find Alexander on here. Yeah, right here. Who married the daughter of the king of Cappadocia, and Aristobulus. Both of these were murdered by Herod. One in a swimming pool. He was suffocated to death. I can't remember exactly what happened to the other one, but they were princes of the Maccabees, and that's the end of the Maccabean line right there. But not before they had offspring, and you can see the offspring of Alexander, for instance. He has kings there. Tigranes, Alexander, Yotape, daughter of Antiochus, king of Comagene. Well, the point is that Alexander at least lived long enough to have some children before he was murdered. Now we'll go back here and follow the dots here. Salome marries Costobarus. You want to remember that name because we're going to find that again in just a very short time. Costobarus was also an Idumean. Herod had him executed. It might be why Salome was so interested in getting Mariamne killed, because she wanted to get rid of Costobarus and go on to something a little better, like Helkias, another name that we're going to encounter in a little bit. Helkias was the temple treasurer. So
just what do the little red flowers mean?
Those mean we need to look at those. We're following Paul's line there.
Is that what you put? You put those on there?
I put those on, yeah.
Okay.
And so in the union of Costobarus and Salome, we're going down to another Antipater down here, named after the grandfather. And we have another Cypros as well, Cypros too, and I wouldn't doubt that you couldn't find her somewhere on this other page over here. Probably a niece. Herod's always married their nieces, and when they divorce their nieces, they go after another niece. Now, this Antipater is the purported father of Paul, and the mother Cypros. And here we see Costobarus again as the oldest of three children, Saulus as the middle child, and another Cypros. Cypros would be his sister. We have mention of Paul having a sister and a nephew. Well, this Cypros, it seems like it was customary to name the male child after the father and the girl child after the mother, because we see this quite a few times. All these names here are so overused that unless you look at them closely, you will get them really mixed up. Sometimes they're used 4 or 5 times. So we see that Cypros, the sister of Paul, marries Helkias. You see, this is a hereditary position, this temple treasurer, and very rich, extremely rich. And from that union comes Julius Archelaus. He's got another nice little star beside his name because he is mentioned in the scripture as going over to the fortress and the Antonia fortress and calling forth the Romans to save Paul. That's the nephew. He also gets a mention in Josephus. He was the first one to actually read and purchase a copy of the Jewish War from Josephus. And that's why he's mentioned in there, because in the Jewish War, because he bought the first copy. So basically, that's the whole thing in a nutshell. That would make Paul the granddaughter of Salome the Great, if that was the case. Now, in Josephus, excuse me, a little off tonight. In Josephus, we see Costobarus and Saulus mentioned together in a couple of places. What is mentioned of them is that they caused riots and that they got away with the riots because they were related to the king. And at this stage, it would probably be King Agrippa first. See if we can find him around here. I don't see him right now. Oh, here he is, Agrippa first. He served 37 to 44. He was in, this character is quite a biography on him. Josephus talks a lot about him. And there's a lot of information on him, even though he ruled only for 7 years. Because Agrippa was one of the Herods that they thought would never be anything. He got so far in debt that he was on the run all the time. And though he grew up with somebody very influential, and that is, he grew up with Caius Caesar, that is Caligula. They had fun together as children, probably pulling the wings off flies and dismembering frogs and stuff. But Caligula and Agrippa were both raised in Rome, of course, and Caligula was the favorite and probably the sex partner of Tiberius Caesar. Tiberius was probably killed by Caligula with a pillow on the face when he got older, because Caligula had been so abused by Tiberius. And if anybody warped Caligula's mind, the craziest emperor that ever lived, it would have been Agrippa. Taking that young man and taking him as a concubine and taking him away to an island with him and abusing him and teaching him how to abuse others. Excuse me. Agrippa the First married Cypros, which was a good marriage because she got him out of trouble. We know this Cypros, this is a completely different one than, say, Paul's mother. This is number 4. Cypros was a rich woman in her own right, had inherited riches, but Agrippa had pretty much wasted everything that she had because Agrippa was extremely generous. And he liked to give things away. He liked to influence people with money. But finally what happened between him and Caligula changed his fate quite a bit as they were riding along in a chariot. This is where I was going. Riding along in a chariot one day, and they were, of course, being piloted by a driver. And they were talking about Tiberius and his illnesses. And the last few years that Tiberius was reigning, he was in exile on the island of the goats, Capri. And so Agrippa said to Caligula something like this: it'll be such a wonderful thing when he's dead and you can take over this empire and you can bring things aright again. Because Agrippa was a good man, generally. You know, he was in trouble with money all the time. And Caligula, of course, they chuckled. Caligula had made it no secret that he was hoping Tiberius would be killed. So the driver of the coach overheard this. And the driver of the coach went and had an interview with Tiberius up on the island of the goats, Capri, and told Tiberius exactly what happened. And so right after that, Agrippa had an appointment with Tiberius because he thought if he pled to Tiberius with all his wealth that he'd stolen from the Roman people, Tiberius would get him off the hook, money-wise. But when he got his appointment with Tiberius, just the opposite happened. He brought up the story that the cart driver had told him, and he put Agrippa in jail with all the commoners. When he was in jail, he met an Essene that was in jail. There was a little bird, an omen bird. The blind Essene there said to Agrippa, "I know who you are." He said, "You see that owl up in a tree there? How'd you know there was an owl in a tree? You're blind." He said, "I know things. Look at that owl. Explore that owl. Remember that owl. It's a good omen for you now. What that owl is telling you is you'll soon be out of prison." Of course, Agrippa wasn't the type to languish in prison. He'd had luxury all his life. But sure enough, before the Essene was done, he said to Agrippa, "But beware, the next time you see that same owl will be the day of your death." And sure enough, Agrippa was recalled by Caligula when Caligula put the pillow to his face, and Tiberius died, and in his will, he told the people that Gaius or Caligula was going to be the new emperor. And the first thing Caligula did was not only let Agrippa out and paid all his bills, but also put him in as the king of the entire region of Israel, usurping the other kings that were there. But in 44, the owl came back. And you can read about that in the Acts of the Apostles. The owl came back, and Agrippa was being hailed as a new god, and he rotted from the inside out. That was his last day. So that doesn't tell you anything about Paul, but the Herods they're quite a bunch, and what stories. Down here I marked a few. I marked Aristobulus V, who married Salome, the daughter of Herod Philip and Herodias. Herodias, who later married Antipas, Herod Antipas, caused a war because Antipas was still married at the time to the daughter of the king of, what was that country just to the east of Israel? Aretas, there we go. Married to the daughter of king of Aretas, and Aretas and the Herods went to war over that because Herodias had come down and taken her place, and Agrippa or Antipas had taken his wife down to Machaerus, the place where John the Baptist was killed, and just dumped her off there. Herod Antipas lost that war, and lost quite a bit of land. And that is why Paul was in such trouble when he went to Damascus. He had to be hauled down in a basket. What, for preaching a good word? More like he was a Herod. What was he doing in Damascus that they wanted to kill him? So anyway, he's married to Salome. He's the one mentioned by Paul in Romans 16. Salome is not mentioned by Paul because she had something to do with the death of John the Baptist. And here's Herodian, from Romans 16, the littlest Herod, Herod the fourth. Agrippa the third, Aristobulus the sixth, down here. So that's why I put those in. Now, you wonder why Paul gets to stand before Fatus and Florus and Felix, those governors, and before King Agrippa the second. He was kin to him. Here's Agrippa the second, right here, the one that Paul stood before, according to Acts. Agrippa first, and another Cypros, married, and had Bernice, mentioned in the Acts. Agrippa second, mentioned in the Acts, as far as Paul. And Mariamne, mentioned in the Acts as a Jewish sister, and Drusilla, also in the Acts, who dumped the king of Emesa, who was a Jew. Drusilla married him, and in order for him to marry her, her condition was, because he was rich as Croesus, her condition was that he be circumcised. So Azizus got himself circumcised to marry Drusilla and dumped him. Instead married Felix. His name is Happy, and I guess he got happy by killing people because he took down many, many, many innocent people. But that didn't last too long because he died right afterwards. You can read about these fellows in the Acts of the Apostles. Is there anybody else here? Oh, yes. Here's Julius Archelaus again. He's right here too, Paul's nephew. He married a daughter of Agrippa, Mariamne, first husband, and the second husband, Demetrius the Albarch, and richest man in Alexandria. Riches. Look, she goes from the temple treasurer of the family of Helkias to the richest man in Egypt. Reminds me of some relatives of mine, actually. But in the Acts, of course, these people are spoken of in the highest terms. Notorious people. So anyway, here is the purported genealogy of Paul, coming from Salome, Herod. And I think I've got just about everybody in there that had anything to do with Paul, but you can see that he, if that is indeed him, and the two or three circumstances with him and Costobarus in Josephus refer to him, then he's hugely connected here with this. And not only to the Herodians, but also to the Maccabean family. A lot of these relatives are Maccabees. Now I wonder, Liz, can you bring us some enlightenment on some of these women that are in here?
Well, yeah. Okay, so this is my premise, and we talked about this. Now, I'm going to put it, can I screen share something?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I want to put up another genealogy. Let's see if I can do this. Hold on. Okay, can you guys see that? Can you see this?
Yes.
Another. Okay, so my whole point is Paul talks in. I was just looking. Where is it in Romans or wherever he's saying? He says, you know, look at I am a Hebrew of the Hebrews, a Benjamite, a Pharisee of the Pharisees. He goes through this whole thing, right? Can somebody give me that, Tim, because I can't find it off the top of my head.
Philippians.
It's in Philippians. Okay.
But let me add what we talked about the other day, that the Benjamites and the Idumeans are the same.
Okay. Well, okay. This is my understanding tracking. Okay, this is like I'm putting another spin on it. Let's put a different spin on all this.
Good.
Okay, so the Idumeans infiltrate into the Jewish bloodlines. The Idumeans coming from Edom, south, okay? They are not genetic, they're Arabs. They're not genetic Hebrews, right? I'm looking at this one.
They were forced to convert by the Maccabees.
Right,
Yeah.
because in the whole they were conquered and they were forced to convert. Now, these Idumeans also, there's a lot of people who track the serpent seed, okay? Now, I know that's what, we won't go into that, but the point is, there are many, many genealogies of the Canaanites and how they have come down through the centuries, the thousands of years, whatever. Many people postulate that they came into the bloodlines through, you know, Esau married into that bloodline. We know that a lot of the Arabs had that bloodline. A lot of they came into, they were in Edom. They came in with the Idumeans. Okay, so the Idumeans becoming the Herodians is also a backdoor way people track in literal seed of the serpent into this arena. Okay, does that make sense? You don't have to agree or not, but I'm just sort of saying that's the premise.
Explain that just a minute, would you? I'm not getting backtracking the seed of the serpent.
Okay, people who follow the concept of the seed of the serpent, meaning there's bloodlines. Okay,
oh,
so the
bloodlines. Okay.
bloodline. So the seed of serpent refers to, you know, so if there is a seed line from Cain, it's called the Cainites, but it morphs to different names. But they track it. It is trackable, and people have tracked it. But Esau married into that bloodline. That's one of the whole Bible stories. And a lot of the Arabs had much intermarriage into those bloodlines. That a lot of the Arabs in the south were of that, had that bloodline in them. And when the Idumeans, who were many of them of that bloodline, when they started to marry into, as Herodians, into the bloodline of the Jews, in through the Hasmonean dynasties and through the, so we're talking about the Herods now, the Idumeans morphing into Herods, right, because the name Herodian, by the grandfather, right? But he is an Idumean coming in. He's marrying into, now this Herodian dynasty is starting with Herod the Great, who had 10 wives, I guess. But a lot of them, the majority of them were provable Jewish women. They were either Hasmonean princesses or they were like we have here, Miriam, number 3 over here. She was the daughter, you said, of both as the high priest, which is, these are genetic Jewish bloodlines. Okay? So I'm looking for bloodlines. Are you tracking with me? So if, according to the Halakha, according to Jewish Halakha, and if the mother is Jewish, and this is my premise, because if Paul is, if he, and I just want to quote this verse in Romans where he also talks about him in Romans 9, and he's talking about kind of the two houses, and he said, I myself were, I could wish that I myself were cursed and cut off from those of my own race, the people of Israel. So he is identifying himself, as in many places, as the people of the race of Judah. Okay, he does not classify himself as a quote-unquote Idumean, or even if he has Herodian marriage in his bloodline thing. He considers himself to be a Judean, a full-blooded Benjamite. Okay, that's my premise. So if that's true, the only way that he could really say that is if it's true. So according to the Halakha, which, this is what the Jews are all about, is their Halakha. The Mishnah states that to be a Jew, one must either be a child of a Jewish mother or a convert to Judaism. Now we know convert to Judaism, the Herods did convert. So in that category, he would qualify as a convert, as being a Jew. But here he says, people of my own race, and he makes it more clear, in my opinion, that he is saying, I am of the race of the Jews, not the other way around. Okay, so which means that he would have had a Jewish mother. So
what's the passage
Halakha
there again? What's the passage?
Well, this is from.
You're making a great point. I just want to look at is it in Philippians?
Well, okay. Oh, I'm in Romans. That was from Romans 9, verse.
All right.
Where am I? Like 2, verse 2, verse 3. Verse 3.
I want to check
And
what.
I was going to look up the word race. I think I have looked that up,
Yeah.
but I think it's the word kinfolk. I mean, when you use that word, you're very specific, thinking the people of my own bloodline. Like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm like saying my bloodline is English. So, I'm English. That's my bloodline, which is very specific. So, okay, so back to the Jewish thing. The Mishnah states that to be a Jew, the mother must be Jewish. This is in Halakha, is codified in the Shulchan Aruch, I don't know, without mention of any dissenting opinion. No source in any classical Halakha text raises any evidence of a different ruling about this Halakha. And it goes back, you can trace it all the way back to the book of Ezra, when they came back from the Babylonian captivity, and Ezra made, all the women and all the children, anyone who was literally not of the race of Judah had to go back. So there were many women and children that went back and could not go with them because they were not ethnically of the race of Judah. Okay, so that's a lot of what they base it on. So my point would be that Paul, because this one shows that Miriam's, Cleopatra, Doris, Cypris, a lot of these were Herodian and high priest Jewish women, which if that is the case, and if one of these women was Paul's mother, because in this one, it doesn't go through, oh, I know, here, let me show you this one. This is the one that you showed a couple weeks ago, Saulus, Thaddeus, Alexander, Herod, this one, this genealogy, but here you have his immediate family. He is a son of Antipater. Doesn't matter who the father is. So I'm making my point. According to Halakha, it doesn't matter who the father is. The Jewishness comes to the mother. The mother was Cypris, who was the princess of Judea. There's no question. She is Jewish. She is a Jewish princess. And this is my presence, is how the Idumeans, how the Herodians, in a backhanded way, and this is why I understand the serpent seed. So because you have this whole drama that you have Herod, who's an Idumean, there was so much intermingled, because if the seed of the woman was going to be bruised by the seed of the serpent in that drama, you would have to have these two bloodlines literally squaring off with each other. Okay. And a lot of this, to me, in my opinion, when you look at the lifestyles of these people, there's definitely, what would be a word? Serpent seed. Yeshua always said you will know them by their fruit. The fruit of these people is ridiculously evil in a lot of cases. But there is a thread when you get into the New Testament, you get into a lot of these people, and you get into Paul. Like a lot of these people, when they received new birth or they converted, they became like they totally cleaned up their act. There is definitely a fruit difference if you're going to believe the readings we have in the New Testament, according to Paul, that he was converted and he did have a total change of heart. And did you find, Jackson, how Timothy and Titus, I believe it was, these were his and were blood nephews also and that was their Christian names, their Roman names. See, because this would also explain why Paul had such special treatment, because he was not only tied into this family of Herodians who had power, and he was also tied in with having bloodline women who were princesses and daughters of high priests, which are extremely high-ranking people in Israel. I mean, you're talking about, we're talking about the top, 5%ers here. Okay. When Timothy gets circumcised, the reason that Timothy is circumcised is because his mother is Jewish, and everybody knows it. So what I'm trying to say is it's all tracking, it's making sense. And in my mind, Paul is saying he is a Jew. He might have a Herodian fathers and uncles and a lot of bad fruit in that bunch, whatever. But he himself, in my opinion, he's saying he considers himself, because his mother was Jewish, and it can be proven that these women are in the bloodlines, that this is indeed a fact. So this one, if this is the Saulus guy, Thaddeus Alexander Herod, his brother is Cyprus and Costa, but they have the mother here as the princess of Judea. And then I have this other side of Herodian women, and these women, it goes on to talk about how Cyprus won, where they were coming from, and how they were princesses and daughters of the high priest, in this, like a Hasmonean princess. I mean, whether she's Jewish, what can I say? So that's my thesis. And the other stories are really interesting, but I'm looking at it to the point of view to prove, is Paul, in his mind, plus he would have had an unbelievable education, having the best of both worlds. He would have had and having Roman citizenship. I see him having a very Hellenized and Greek education, which nothing wrong with that. And he also was totally steeped in the writings of his own quote unquote people. So take it away, or whoever.
Well, I'll just make a couple of comments to that. I don't think I don't think there's any question religiously that he was a Jew. However, when I'm looking at this passage in Romans 9, starting at 1, and I'm looking at it in Greek, and it's extremely difficult to interpret what this is saying, because he talks about adoption. Well, I'll just read it literally. Truth I speak in Christos, I'm not lying, bearing witness with me, the conscience of me, in spirit, holy, that grief to me is great and unceasing sorrow in my heart. I could wish indeed a curse to be on myself. I separated from Christos. Listen, for the brothers of me, kinsmen of me, according to the flesh, who are Israelites, who is the divine adoption as sons, and the glory and the covenants and the law-giving and the service and the promises, whose are the patriarchs, and of whom is the Christ, according to the flesh, being over all God blessed to the ages. Amen. You can hear, the reading here in English is just literally translated, that it would be extremely hard to make out what he's saying about kinsmen. But I want to work on that text.
Well, why? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I'm just saying that it could be translated in numerous ways, but there's no question that Paul was a Jew if during the Maccabean time that he was, his family was inducted into Judaism, and if his mother is indeed a Jewish princess of Judea, I think that your page said, then I don't think we have any problem with that. Of course he's a Jew. I think it comes more in like, what side is he on? I think, again, understand that I believe that we must have Paul. We must have Paul. We cannot get rid of Paul if we're to be whole in our understanding. But I'm not to the point anymore where I'm perfectly sure that Paul's revelation is authentic, because he, to my knowledge, he doesn't report it, or that he didn't have other reasons, being this high up in the hierarchy of kingship and being so close with some of his other friends to the imperial Rome. I guess what we need to ask ourselves is, did what come out of Pauline Christianity affect the world in a good way or a bad way? Because obviously, if he's writing to Seneca and sending his letters up to Seneca, and he's reading them to the emperor, whether Paul likes it or not, and the Christians become persecuted and killed, but sympathy. I was reading again last night in Cassius Dio, the sympathy that the Roman people, their hearts turned toward these people because they were being so persecuted when they had in the past, though they were thought to have been in a dangerous cult. They never caused any trouble or anything, but they were coming into Rome like crazy, according to Cassius Dio. The people turned toward the Christians, and that persecution's really what got the thing going so much in Rome, in that area. Maybe we ought to judge Paul instead of on our ideas of doctrinal purity, on the result of what he did, whether he meant to or not. What do you think?
What are you saying?
What am I saying? I just asked a question. What do we judge him on?
Well, let me ask you, because the thing is, it's very tricky on how you read the data, because we all read it with spin, and it's true, and I put myself in that place too. We want to see what we want to see. That's just it's very hard to be very completely objective. But again, if Paul can be taken at face value, if he did have a conversion experience, if he did, which he says he did, and the testimony is he did, and what I understand of Paul's writings is by about 200, everything is skewered. There's no more pure doctrine left, really. It's all being okay, now I wanted to say, like, since I did a big teaching today on my YouTube channel about Paul on unpacking his concept of being dead to the law, and what that means. And I think that there's a lot more, if you can strip away the translations and get back to the understandings with the larger knowledge we have. We're talking about the law of sin and death. We are not talking about the Mosaic law. I think Paul is completely and totally, this whole concept, the Pauline doctrine Paul preaches, not at all what is being preached in our churches today. I think most people can agree with that. That's what I think is totally true. So it's getting back to what did he say. But if he had a true conversion experience, I mean, you can't hold his family line against him, like hold him hostage to it.
I think that what's happening with a lot of people is that, first of all, they are considering that Galatians is a manifesto of a new religion. And then second of all, that people are pretty much looking for reasons to get rid of him because of some of the things that he purportedly says about women. I think that's another big thing with women are very of the pseudo-Paul writing.
Well, I'm a woman and I've done the work in the text, and he doesn't say that at all. That is bad translation. And you know as well that the women Paul hangs out with, they're women apostles, women presbyters. That's not at all, excuse me, what is truly in the text.
I know that, but see, Christians don't know that.
Well, that's their problem. I mean, I'm just trying to get to the bottom of a.
Yeah. I think the third thing is that there has been so much coming out of the paper mills in the last 20 years. It's anti-Pauline. And I think some people with about half wits read that and then they pass on their conception of what is being said about Paul, and that's passed on to someone else. Next thing you know, Paul's an adulterer, Paul is a murderer, Paul is this and that. Take, for instance, James Tabor's book, Jesus and Paul. That makes Paul out to be a very mentally ill psychopath in that book. It's good as far as getting into his head. But that book everybody ought to read, and you can take away with it what you want concerning him. But Paul was definitely, in some way, a megalomaniac. You know what I mean? He thought extremely highly of himself and his place. And the Tabor just gets into the recesses of his pineal gland to get to his personality. Maybe we ought to scan that book and pass it out. It's very good. Why don't you look at some of these comments? They're looking pretty good flying through.
Okay, but all right, and my final point, because it's really after 10, I just want to make a point. I because I read a lot of, I have been spending years trying to understand the esoteric understanding that is in the text. The Essenes, Yeshua, everyone testifies to this. There's an esoteric understanding. Paul speaks into this esoteric understanding. That's why I feel like I get him in a lot of this. And this is a bit of the problem, because if you read things too literally, too fundamentalistically, yes, surface value, but our scriptures are polysemous. And this is one of my personal missions, to try to get it under. There are many, many levels of understanding and meaning, and they're valid. I mean, if our Yahweh cannot hold it, cannot be polysemous, then, but anyways, I don't know what I was going to go with that point. My whole thing with Paul, I'm going to put it, but I'm doing teachings on my YouTube. I did one today unpacking what I consider to be what he's talking about in certain aspects in Galatians and Colossians with the law. And so, if people are more interested in that, but whatever, in my mind, he's just, I don't have to throw the New Testament out. I don't think there's a big problem. I think the new religion, quote unquote, that people think Paul started is like way after the fact. And we're all trying to get back to Eden. So
I think what you've done tonight is very good. And there's a request on the chat that I would like to take up with here, and that is, Lizette says that she's got, I imagine, the translation of the Aramaic New Testament for a couple of passages. Do you still have that, Lizette? Some people wanted to hear it.
Yes, I do. Okay, I'll read it. And I say the truth in Mashiach, and do not report falsely, and my conscience bears me witness in the Ruach HaKodesh, that I have great sorrow, and the sadness of my heart is without pause. For I have prayed that I myself might be accursed from Mashiach for my brothers and my kinsmen in the flesh, who are sons of Israel, to whom belong the adoption of sons, and the glory, and the covenants, and Torah, and the ministrations, and the promises, and the fathers, and from among whom Mashiach appeared in the flesh, who is Elohim over all, to whom be praises and benediction forever and ever. Amen. Can I read
you
down to
unpack
12
that?
to 14?
No, I want you to unpack that first, if you can.
For me to unpack it?
Yeah,
Oh, great.
a little bit. If anyone can do it, it's you, Lizette.
Kinsman, who are his kinsmen?
Who? Oh, I didn't want you to ask me that. I was kind of reading it. And you put me on. Now my face.
Oh, well, that's all right.
Okay, so the kinsmen. Who are the sons of Israel's who belong to? No, but the rest of the passage unpacks it.
Okay.
May I finish the rest of the passage?
Yes,
Okay.
you may.
Not, however, that the word of Elohim has actually failed, for all are not Israel who are of Israel. Neither are they all sons because they actually failed. For all are not, I'm sorry, I read that. Neither are they all sons because they are of the seed of Abraham. For it was said, in Yitzhak will your seed be called. That is, it is not the children of the flesh who are the children of Elohim, but the children of the promise are counted for the seed. For the word of promise was this, at that time will I come, and that's a quote, and Sarah will have a son, close quote. Nor this only, but Rebekah also, when she had lived with one man, our father Yitzhak, before her children were born or had done good or evil, the choice of Elohim was proclaimed in advance, that it might stand not through works, but through him who called the choice up. For it was said, the elder will be servant to the younger. As it is written, Yaakov have I loved, and Esau have I hated. What will we say then? Is there iniquity with Elohim? May it never be. And then there's a quote here when it says about, for not all Israel who are of Israel, not all Israelites are after the flesh physical birth, are the Israel of Elohim. And then it refers to Galatians 6:16. The next two verses affirm this. It is not the children of the flesh who are the children of Elohim, but the children of the promise are accounted for the seed. Therefore, regardless if a person is born Jewish, Israelite, or otherwise, the seed of promise are those who enter in the Malkut kingdom of Elohim in Yeshua and permit Torah to be written upon their hearts.
Well, that's almost like he's doing some apologetics for his situation. It's the first thing that comes to my mind. It's very good. Yes, it's explanatory.
Well, I would think so. If with all that line that he has, if all that genealogy would be true, then he would know better. I mean, look at all the things that you guys delineated today.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense. See, I think what's missing here, we don't have him saying, I'm of the line of Herod, I'm got friends in the government, etc. He doesn't say this, but everyone at his time knew that already. They already knew. So he is, in a way, explaining his own incorporation into this Malkut for people that already knew.
No, well,
The way you read it, I just thought about reading apologetic literature. I read some of that last week, and that's what it sounds like. Not to apologize to anybody, but to make it known, explaining it from that perspective. Well, I think that's a good explanation for sure, because if we didn't accept his explanation, we wouldn't be in. We wouldn't be in, would we? No.
well, I think this is the point, is that Yeshua, and this gets into theology, and we probably, I mean, that could take, theological debates, but if Yeshua, the name means salvation, it says that, Peter said that the Father has spoken to us in this day now by his Son. So in other words, Yeshua is the door. He is the one. No man comes to the Father, no Gentile, no one comes to the Father now except through this name. This is what I'm Paul saying that. He is the promised seed. He is salvation. So now he is the door. That's it. But I did want to just make one last point on that word kinsman in there. It means genos. I mean, it absolutely means offspring. So for him to say, and again to read that he is, I just get, he can't help who his family is, and why wouldn't he? What does it matter if he's Herodian or not? He himself considers himself a Jew. The word kinsman means literal offspring. So of that stock.
Yes, it does. It's soon
Of
genon.
that stock.
Genon has to do with birthing. Soon means to come together. Kinsman. I'm looking at it right now. Good. Well, look, this is something that we're getting down to the foundational spirituality and understanding that perhaps we have missed in all this time. I'm just saying, why don't we get away and go to the boot camp, and let's make this a point of discussion right here. Because there's a lot more to be said. There's a lot of confusion for thinking people over the idea of inclusion or not inclusion into this kingdom. Well, I just put that out to you. And Smith's got one last comment. If we extract the entire racial component out of the argument and make this about the spiritual identity, I think we can distill this down to the essence of the topic. Talk to Jesse Jackson. Racial identity is everything. He was in the news today. What did he have?
Yeah, he has Parkinson's, I think.
Oh, Parkinson's.
Actually, look, and it's not. I am a Jesse Jackson hater, but don't wish Parkinson's on anybody because that's how my mom died.
Yeah.
So, well, and besides, that's just not a. Even if that hadn't happened, that's not a very nice way to go.
No.
Losing control of your body and stuff like that. Just you can't hold on to stuff and things like that. Yeah. So wish him the best, but he just needs to get over his political idealism.
Yeah, I think in the millennium, he'll have one of these small white churches outside of Pensacola, Florida. I mean, he'll be assigned there.
So, would you get the big one in Chicago? Like, kind of reverse the.
I don't want any of them. No. Anyway, this has been a great meeting, and let's do this again. I appreciate everybody's getting involved in it. And it was even good to be watching Robert's legs there in that one passage. He's wearing short pants. He's got a can in his hand. So good to see you, brother. And we'll catch you all tomorrow. Thank you, Liz. Very good.
Shabbat shalom. Okay.
Night. Lila Tov.
Lila Tov.